In the recent past, I think there has been a lot of talk about what is happening to journalism, and that has also has its repercussions. I don't know whether it's repercussions, but definitely we feel the echo in the classrooms and campuses. For example, in the last few months, there have been some writings, newspapers about what is happening in journalism. Some of the best institutions are closing down. Latest was IIJNM. Before that, Comets, and before that, Symbiosis School, Bangalore campus, and a lot of other state universities and private campuses have closed their mass communication journalism program. I'm talking primarily of the master's courses. UG are typically introductory, and the students come because of the sort of prestige attached to that. That with journalism, psychology, and English. But when it comes to master's level, there is a bit of a sort of a crisis. And in the WhatsApp groups of media teachers in Karnataka and at national level, we have been discussing that. And some of the things we are discussing is, for example, first and foremost, we do not have role models. Ouch. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry to say that. I didn't mean.
No offense taken.
See,
Yeah. Freedom of speech and expression.
Our generation as a student, we had people say if it's television, we had Doordarshan, and we used to have people like the anchors, news readers like Minu and Salma Sultan, and Nitya Ravindran, and Sunit Tandon, and from the private side we had Pranay Roy. I mean, it was quite a pleasure watching them. And from the say reporting side, we had M.V. Kama, Tarun Shuri, and in the recent past, right in front of us, that's we have got Sugata Srinivasa Raju, Hari Kumar, Ravish Kumar. But right now, somehow there seems to be a void. Say youngsters look at I want to be, about 5-10 years ago, if you ask, who do you want to be, Barkada or Aditya Desai or Pranay Roy. Today I don't think they want to be those who make a lot of noise. They don't want to be. It's therefore, first of all, if there is no inspiration, who will they model themselves after? So that is one of the reasons I find. Probably I'll stop maybe and come back later.
Whenever I visit any college for a guest lecture, the first thing the professors tell me is, please don't say anything negative about journalism. We already have very few students interested in it. This time, it's not on me. It's on him. He's to blame. Since Kanchan has been on both sides, the same question: what is more difficult, teaching students or training journalists or being a journalist?
I think both have the equal amount of challenges. I've completely enjoyed teaching students. I still continue to teach students and I totally enjoy it. I think a lot of students do want to learn. I think the problem is in the way we are teaching them. We are being fuddy-duddy, we are being old school, we are saying, do this, do that, don't you know this and don't you know that. I think what we need to do is we need to figure out how they want to learn and teach them in that way. So my next elective that I'm going to offer, warning, is going to be called How to Be a Social Media Influencer. And I'm going to teach journalism through that. And that I think is going to be
That is like keeping up with the times. Yeah. So I don't know how many of you want to be journalists. Show of hands. How many of you want to be journalists? Wonderful. The possibility is that you will probably end up in newsrooms that are headed or at least being guided by people like Kanchan, like Dakshin. I meet a lot of people in the field who say, I'm Dakshin's kid. So what is it being Dakshin's kid?
Okay, let me begin at the beginning. So, if you 4 decades ago, when I started as a young reporter, nobody knew what journalism was. Today, everybody knows what journalism is. So, this is really the challenge, because there's been such a churning of this thing that we call journalism that today I think everyone with a camera or anyone walking on the road and maybe witnessing an accident becomes a journalist, because the moment we become a journalist. So the problem now is it's easy to teach somebody who hasn't learned something, but it's very difficult to teach someone who already thinks he or she knows everything. So really, when we talk of curriculum, I think this is something that really especially for all of you who are here. I think it's going to be very, very crucial, and it's in the curriculum that all the interests remain. And I'm still working as a journalist with the federal, so I also taught at IIJNM, so I know both sides of the divide, and I think there's a lot of work to be done, and we are right in the middle of it.
So be open to the teachings that will come to you in the classroom as well as in the field. That's what our action skills.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So what you basically do is, as Dakshin kids, they get exposed to lines of thought which they probably would have never dreamt existed.
Okay, coming back, circling back to the core topic that we're discussing today. When we were having a discussion, we wanted to prepare and not make, at least I didn't want to make a fool out of myself, so I bothered all of them to connect with you on a video call and talk about what subject we want to discuss. When Kanchan brought up something very interesting. When journalism is such a field where some of them don't necessarily study to be journalists. You have engineers, you have doctors, you have short service commission officers who have, after the army, come and join journalism. Given how varied the kind of people they are in the field, how important does a journalism curriculum become for people who are pursuing journalism to become career journalists? They have not chosen any other path. They're like me, when they were in 5th standard, 6th standard, decided they want to be journalists and did not learn any other life skill. So, how crucial does it become to have different components in curriculum? You're talking about subjects, economics.
So one of the things that I really think the two things over here. One is that we need to start with a journalism curriculum. If you want to call it a journalism curriculum, very well. We want to start with schools. That actually means starting this whole business of critical thinking. Because journalism is nothing else but critical thinking. You're just asking questions all the time. So one is that you want to do that. Two is what journalism demands, and I think the sad part in masters programs these days is that a lot of people who come to the masters program come from a journalism field or a literature field. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and I think there's some people over here who, some of our best students came from backgrounds like engineering and from medicine, right? And I remember there was somebody who came with a music degree and somebody who came from IIT Kharagpur, right? So when they come from there, they want to come into journalism. They bring in their own analytical skills, their own core competencies and knowledge, and that comes into this whole business with journalism curriculum, which is why I find it problematic that young people think that if they want to be a journalist, they first have to do journalism in the undergraduate level. I would say at the undergraduate level, do what you like doing. It could be political science, it could be economics, it could be history, it could be English literature, it could be just music, it could be anything. And then look at seeing how you want to do journalism. A journalism curriculum on the whole, I think, has to be based in this business of democracy. Because if there's no democracy, there's no journalism. Very clearly. Right? And in sort of a certain amount of knowledge of politics, of political science, of economics, of sociology, of all of these, only then you can actually work around the curriculum that would teach journalism, because journalists are generalists. They need to know a lot of things before they actually can.
Something that you pointed to is critical thinking, which also means critical thinking is, if you look at a traditional setup, critical thinking is something that's frowned upon, whether it is newsrooms, whether it is institutions. So let me ask Richard Rego, as academics, what is the line you draw between critical thinking and what you presume as being disrespectful? When somebody asks you a question, you might not like the question itself, the tone itself, the subject. So where do you draw that line?
Personally, and I think Joseph definitely encouraged quite a lot. And one of my students are here. One of my first lines says, "There is no wrong question." One. Secondly, you can challenge me. You can challenge me. The thing is, read something, have some background, and challenge me. So what I say is need not be confident. So come up with your ideas, we can debate, and class should be a conversation. That's when it's not only teachers or teachers and one students, but it's a collaborative learning. And students among themselves also challenge each other. When they, therefore, I conduct group discussion in my, give them readings, give group discussion. That is when students come up with the child ideas, different ideas, and at some time they might come up with some excellent idea, and at the in the long run that develops into critical thinking, a systematic logical thinking, and that is what helps a lot. Otherwise, just learning, say, syllabus or definitely the history alone may not contribute much. I'm not saying no, totally doesn't, but definitely that is not the only thing. There is a lot beyond the syllabus what it describes.
Do you agree the same is true of newsrooms? We've had a lot of young journalists. Like, when you pass out of college, you're all idealists. You know what you want, what you're getting into journalism for. There is a set idea of what I want to do as a journalist. But reality hits when they enter the newsroom. So it could be both. You could either end up with an editor who's extremely supportive, is nurturing of your inquisitive nature, or you could also get stuck with an editor who's very set in their way of approach. How is it in the newsrooms? How do students find it when they enter the newsroom?
Yeah, I mean, journalism has a lot of romance. It's also very romantic. When you think of journalism, the kind of reportage you can do, the kind of work you can do and influence people, change policy decisions and all that. That's fine, but as Anusha says, when you get into the newsroom, you really have to put your it's a grind basically. You need to really work. It can get monotonous if you have to work very hard, and you will not be doing any of those things that you had in your mind. I mean, that's what people think. So since there have been a lot of our students who have joined journalism, say you speak to them a year later, they say it's quite boring. It's quite boring, and when you ask the reason, they say that we keep doing the same thing. So they don't see an opportunity, because journalism fundamentally is very different. It is not like a job elsewhere. Suppose you join the civil services, you join a bank, you join even a private company. Your area is very clearly demarcated. You are supposed to do certain sets of things only. You can't do anything beyond that. So the hierarchy is very important. In journalism, that is not the case. You can create your own opportunities. There are, for instance, there have been people who have joined as interns, people who have been trainees, and who have done great stories. It's not that and any I'm talking of a professional editor or a professional boss. Anybody will appreciate it. There's no question of anyone feeling threatened by it or anything like that. So this has been my experience. Okay, so what typically happens is that when people join as journalists, they imagine that there is a story laid out for them, in front of them. They don't realize that you have to work hard. You have to get the lead to do a good story. You have to follow up on the story, do meticulous work. You have to do, go around talking to people, looking at documents. So it's pretty hard work. So if you have the stomach for it, you will end up doing a great job, right? So, and I'm telling you now that no one will prevent you from doing it. And if you have, let's say, for instance, you're on the desk or you're a reporter who's supposed to do certain minimal things in the office, of course you have to do that because the organization has to run, the larger news flow has to be there. But you can still figure out a way and you can still get time for your own stories. So this is what I have seen, and it's always in your grasp. It's your initiative. And journalism is always open for that, irrespective of whether it was 40 years ago or now or any point of time in the future.
I'm going to keep you engaged with another question and come back to Padri for a follow-up on that. When, like I said, when students enter the newsroom, what should they expect? And the extension of that question is, what does a newsroom expect of an education institution when they send their students to you, as whether interns, whether junior reporters, journalism?
Okay. So we are talking of a digital newsroom. I think that's what BIF are largely. and the digital newsroom is the newsroom of the future, right? There is a fundamental difference between a digital newsroom and the legacy newsroom, let's say the Hindu or Indian Express or Deccan Herald. So there, what you would do is you would join as a reporter and you would report. I mean, there would be events for you to cover. You would cover it and then do what you're doing, or you would edit. You would look at copies, you would rewrite them, give a headline, etc., etc. In a digital newsroom, it's very different. There are three streams that you need to simultaneously know. One is um, the text, that is editing and reporting. Then you also need to know about videos. You as a reporter, when you go out, you are expected to walk out with your camera. And if you're seeing something, you're talking to something, you're expected to take a video and interview the person on camera. Okay, so which means you have a video footage. You should be able to come back and stitch together a video. Okay? And the third thing is that you may have, you can convert the whole thing into a podcast. So these three things, podcast is where you, of course, all of you know this. You have a conversation, you have a monologue, or whatever that. So these three things converge in a digital news. It's not only about your reporting or editing. And there's one more which is equally important, which is how you push your story on social media. It's extremely important. And let me tell you, there are very few people who really know how social media works. It's not, as an individual, I can tweet my stories, I can, do many things with it, but how you promote it, how you, make reels from it in Instagram, how you tweet your stories, how you get people to look at your stories. So all these things are in your hands. So it's a whole gamut of things which did not exist before. So a digital newsroom is very different. It's far more wholesome, and then you get to know a whole lot of things, and you also learn, one hell of a lot of things about news, which is absolutely quantum.
Are there any influencers? Yeah. Anybody who has yes, I see one hand going up. All right, good. No, the reason I asked that, like Dakshin mentioned, you should also know the art of selling your story online, and it's easier said than done for pure journalistic, newsy stories, topics, whichever way. So I was out of curiosity. Do you ever share news stories since you're an influencer? Yeah, just a yes or no is enough. Yes, you do. Okay. Very nice. I hope more influencers do share. Trying to come to you for the news part of the question. Now, Dakshin has already detailed what a digital newsroom would look like. Do you think the syllabus that you have for the students enables them to be ready for a digital newsroom? Or do you see that there is still a gap? And what is required to bridge that gap? When they finish internship, I'm sure they've done their internships. Do you see a mismatch between what has been taught in the classroom versus what we see when they are doing their internship on field?
We at Joseph, we definitely have much improved and updated syllabus. And when our students go for internship or join as freshers, they do not have much of a difficulty in adjusting. But definitely there is always a bit of a gap. We can't accept, even medical education there is a gap. You complete MBBS and start practice, there is a gap, and you find certain things are irrelevant. That sort of thing is there definitely, and you can't reproduce the exact news truth in universities. For example, you have an advertising and public relations program masters, and initially it was completely 100% taught by the industry professionals. And recently, one of our alums from that particular first batch came to interact with the student, and when she was asked, the student said, "No, that was all theory." Then after that, I went out and said, "Hey, come on! You were taught all your teachers were from the industry, and you are still saying theory." Father, but then that is very different. Huh? So the practicing advertisers and public relations of the officials, managers come and give, and still is theory. Simply because you cannot transplant an actual industry setup in a new university campus. That basic difference is there. But what we some of our institutions, private, I know Christ is doing something like that. We're trying to do as much as possible to simulate and bring the syllabus curriculum closer to the industry as possible.
can replicate newsrooms. We've done that at IIT. We've been past 3 years. And we only had classes 3 days a week, and the rest of the time it was a newsroom. And but I think about the trouble that what I see now, having moved out of this whole training space, is when it's a private institution like the IIT or whatever, we can afford to do it because we are creating our own syllabus, we are changing it every 6 months. We were changing it and turning it around. But when you are a deemed university or a university that comes under the UGC, a degree program, right? You start, the first thing you start with is that every person who's teaching the program has to have a doctorate, right? But we had only journalists. We did not have anybody who was a non-journalist or who was an academic in that sense of the word. So that's a constraint that people are working with, and it's a problem that needs to be addressed in a different manner. And so therefore the to draw that line between academics and actual training is very very tricky. It's not easy, but it's possible only if you bring in industry. You need to, like he says, even if there was industry that was teaching and they said it was all theory, I think what then industry is doing a disfavor by teaching only theory. They should have actually made them do practical work. Right? Some of the stories have been stolen by the print media, by the local media. They just look at our website and we see the same stories 2 weeks later in the newspapers because of the way we were doing it. But the question then is the people who are setting up the curriculum, who are coming up with this idea that everybody who teaches all courses should have PhDs, needs a rethink.
You answered our next question was to ask the difference primarily between journalism schools or institutions like St. Joseph's, like Christ, that offer a course in journalism, and journalism schools that are run by media houses. Is there a huge difference? Different.
I really can't say about journalism schools run by media houses. I don't know any of them. I only had heard of the Times School of Journalism, which then since I shut down. But sometimes I get the feeling that they're just using them as interns.
And you have to pay them for it.
Just guessing. No idea.
Dakshin has a point on the same question.
I mean, even me, I really don't know how media houses run their journalism schools. Frankly, I've not been exposed to that, so I don't want to second guess them.
But otherwise, journalism schools versus institutions that offer journalism courses. Kanchan covered the component of the compulsions that colleges have. You need to have a set qualification for you to be a professor. Is that an impediment, or is that something of value? What is your assessment?
Okay, so let
if I ask
me
the question to Father Rego, I know what the answer would be, so I'll ask it.
No, let me say this, that Kanchan here was really the brainchild behind many of the curriculum I did follow. And the core of this was that only journalists were part of the faculty. If you're not a journalist, then you can't be part of the faculty. It's as simple as that. Because you bring the experience, to the classroom, and then you speak like a journalist. In fact, I always used to tell students that, I'm first a journalist and then I'm a teacher. So, and I would, it would be like a press conference. Sometimes, the questions that are being asked, there would be, a big debate or an argument, etc., etc. So, and then even the way the curriculum was designed was, for instance, I used to teach international politics. So, I always would say that when they join any newsroom, from day one, they should be able to report on India's neighborhood, for instance, the SAARC countries. Any stories on Pakistan, Bangladesh, Ceylon, Sri Lanka, anything, they should be in a position to contribute something or write about it or understand it. So that was the intention. So, because I know exactly what is required of a journalist in the newsroom when it comes to international politics. So I naturally bring, experience into the classroom. But there are institutes which don't have journalists as faculty, and I'm sorry, but there is a huge gap between what's taught and what the reality is when they go out, and the students experience.
Actually, I wanted to This was reminded of one thing that when he said international politics, and then the students, because one of the rules that we had was whatever subject you had to do a story. You didn't write about it. So how do we do international stories? Are you going to send us to wherever? So no, you're going to sit here and you're going to DM people who are in Syria, we got fantastic stories from Ukraine, from Syria, right? Because they contacted people who were stuck there and they wrote them. And we had a foreign minister those days who would actually reply to them. That was Sushma Swaraj. They would DM her, they would get a reply in no time. So I think with digital technology, there's plenty that's possible. There's plenty that's actually exciting, and that we can really change in journalism education. And I think we should have more people in it.
Now, of course, what is it technology of use for if it doesn't save on the expenses of the students? You don't have to go to Syria to do stories. But I do want to understand, journalism students generally are very enterprising. Some of you must have attempted it, ever tried a AI chatbot to do your assignments, come up with headlines, introductions, things. No one? Oh yes, good. Somebody's honest at least, and I appreciate that. Why they have a system in place to detect AI? I for a minute there thought you were saying yes, I have used AI chatbots for assignments. Did you get caught? Okay. No, why I ask this question is as much as students also rely on AI, probably I'm told that it's not as reliable. Newsrooms are also probably looking at a future where AI becomes part of their day-to-day work. Is that something that you see in the future? Anybody? But you can tell me about if you've given that a thought. If AI is something that you would consider making part of carefully to work with.
In fact, we have already done that. We have done that. Probably they are one of the early one. I mean, see, there is a point in what you're asking. Recently, one of my colleagues, Mr. Ravinandan, now he's doing his PhD in data journalism. I think, he asked some questions from the RTI to UGC, asking how many of them have integrated data journalism, which they learned before the AI, of course, before, and finally got an answer. Of the 850 plus institutions which offer journalism at various level programs in the curriculum, only 39 institutions offer data journalism. It speaks that see some of the universities, colleges are not even willing to see the field is changing. And we are lucky, we have got some young minds among the teachers, and so they have been able to integrate. We have got in every paper there is a unit on AI and writing, AI and editing, AI and video editing. So we have got that. So we do see, I mean, you can't avoid the fact, and it is useful. Only thing is it has to be used responsibly, not outsource your work to AI, but be informed, better informed, and that does wonders.
Well, a lot of students like because you have it as part of curriculum. Maybe when they become newsroom leaders, they're in a better position to handle it. But what about journalists? Like someone was speaking about dinosaurs who are 50, 60 years old eventually. All of us who are working in the field will also become outdated. Do you believe that a mid-career curriculum for journalists, a mid-career course, when they can come back for two reasons? One, to improve on their skills, where AI is one, technology is the other. Secondly, most importantly, just come back to basics. Remember why you became a journalist. Remember why you are in a newsroom. What is it that you did when you passed out of college? And along the way, I think you somehow forget why you became a journalist. Do you believe something like that would be helpful?
Yeah, you actually cut the thought out of it because I was just thinking along the same lines because journalism, what we're talking about are the changing trends, but the fundamentals remain the same. What do you do as a journalist? You basically come out with a damn good story. What you're looking out for is story, right? You go to let's say there is some natural calamity that happens. You go there, you bring out the best possible stories from there, and so as a those things don't change, and then you keep the truth as much as possible. You don't twist things around. I mean, you try to keep things straight, and you can't rely on AI. And what AI does is that it in some ways sucks the life out of a story. You know, let's say you do a story, for instance, say in English, and you want to get it translated, say in Kannada. You will have the translation, but the translated version will not have life in it. It will be lifeless. It will be boring to read because there is something about writing a story which actually captures the spirit of the story that you're writing, which in AI still hasn't managed to reach that kind of level. So there is a severe limitation with AI.
Thank you. When Father Rego was speaking, his opening remarks, one of the things he pointed to is that there are no more role models in journalism for students to be inspired and to pursue a career in journalism. Kanchan, as somebody who's taught and also has been in field, is that the only reason you see a dip in interest in, is there at all a dip in interest to pursue journalism as a career or to study journalism as a student? And is that the reason? Because you see every day your news anchors preaching at you on television. Ethics has become a cause of concern for not just the society but media professionals who are within the space. When, as a media professional, I look at some of my colleagues in the field, and it makes me think, okay, do they know what journalism is? Do they know? Is that one of the reasons you believe? Do you believe that there is a dip in interest for journalism, and what reasons?
I think it's more complicated than just that. Uh, there are, like, maybe there are not enough role models. Maybe the role models are different. We also need to there might be a dip at the masters level. I think the industry also needs to open up and look at what is it that they want from people. They need to look at what they are doing themselves, do a bit of introspection, and say how they can attract young people, because we are not going to live forever. At some point, we are going to have to hand over things to people, and it has to be the younger people. You have to get young blood in, and you have to get them interested in the profession. And to do that, you have to attract them to the profession. You have to get them interested. You have to incentivize them, and there are various ways of doing it, and including economics. If you look at while there is the notion that journalism doesn't pay, that notion is not entirely true. And by the way, let me tell you, independent media seems to be paying much more than legacy media right now. And even if they don't have any money, so if you look
That's why
at
we
Summer,
don't have any.
it probably because if you look at Summer's organization pays a lot more than say the Deccan Herald will do for a startup, yeah, for an intern, for a person who's just out of college, right? So I think they need to look at that, and we also need to change the narrative that journalism doesn't pay. If you look at basic starting salaries, they are the same as any fresher engineering graduate will get. Right? The trouble starts later, and how you grow, and that I think is where we have to enable young people to see if they can go into areas that they are interested in, and that will help them make a living, right? Even if that means going into these niche areas of niche journalism, or starting their own little websites and starting their own blogs and being social media influencers, if you want to look at that. But we need to enable that. And it's not just journalism institutes, but also the industry needs to. It's both ways.
Spoke about niche areas. Coming to Pastor Richard, now because of digital newsrooms, we do see subject-specific newsrooms that focus just on one thing. You see live law, you see a bar and bench. They're very focused on the kind of journalism that they want to do. But is the academic space catering to that kind of a one subject only focus areas? Is that very difficult to do? Is that a challenge that you face while setting your career?
We do it at one thing is that in our programs we have quite a lot now. We try to bring in a lot of things and put them together. So the thing is, at the end of the when they join a masters, they come. Many of them come with a plenty of passion. I want to be a journalist. I want to change the world. But by the time they complete, things have changed. They have seen a lot of other things. So from maybe say typical reporting or typical journalism. Now they have seen probably, I want to do advertising, I want to do public relations. So the thing is, the meaning of journalism and academics has changed for students at least, because that becomes a window for them to get into PR, to do content writing. And there are a lot more jobs, and starting salaries they are quite higher there in content, for example. Okay. So and definitely for youngsters, starting salary is an attraction. You can't help it. So therefore, and besides in academic, you can't have only say for example, development journalism masters. Very difficult. Though there are abroad, there are some programs like that. But in India, I don't think we can have a specialized program only in this or that. That is too narrow to have an education like that. So therefore, we tend to leave it a little wider. And in fact, what we do is we bring in a lot of other social sciences also in our master's program. We've got courses in political science, courses in economics, without which you can't survive. Ultimately, journalism has to carry these messages. Journalism is only a sort of medium to carry the messages. So that we are trying to also equip them there, so they also fit in different places.
Yeah. So, like he said, it's very difficult to do an entire program that is only in, say, one kind of journalism. But what we've done in the past is we've offered courses in, say, sports journalism, covering arts and culture. We've done these kind of data journalism. These are again elective courses, again where students do work in these areas. But but what we need to convey to the student is that if you learn how to do a basic story well, you can do you can use the same principles and do a story in automobile journalism, in fashion, in food, in travel, everywhere, once you've got the idea right. And we had a student who came in and said, I only want to do automobile journalism. I said, good, get me a story in automobile journalism. And you won't believe he got me a story every week. They had to do a story every week in that had to do with automobile journalism. He finally joined Autocar or whatever, the whole version, right? And something else, and he's editor and some other thing today. But the point is, you need to learn how to do that basic story well. And if you learn to do that basic story well, you can do it.
I'll have one last question to Dakshin before we open the floor to questions. You may deem it controversial. Maybe some people might deem it controversial. There used to be a time when you would tell reporters that you are not the story. The reporter is not the story. But we live in an era where you see a face. You like to see a face to the story. You like to put a face to a particular story, which also extends to what are necessarily journalism awards. Say 20 years ago, we did not have as many journalism awards as we have today. And I see a lot of young journalists who say, okay, should I do this story because I can send this story to a award and hope to achieve that award? Nothing wrong with it at all. In fact, if you've done a story that's worth telling and showing the world, you should absolutely do everything that the story deserves as far as putting it out to the world goes. But another lesser spoken component of these awards is that there is a knack to applying to these awards. There's a knack of writing a commendation to the award. There's a knack of applying to these awards. Do you think you should start teaching journalism students how to apply for awards when they eventually become journalists?
Well, on this, I'm completely not qualified. I've not got any award so far, so I have no clue, how people get awards.
Is that because you didn't know how to write for an award?
I think we have a couple of students who got they got the Ramnath Goenka Award and Tamili Award and the Reading Awards.
Right. All right. If any questions, we're happy to. Yeah. No.
Journalists must always ask questions.
Hello everyone, I'm Ken. I'm a first year in visual communication at St. Joseph's. My question is, so in this digital age, almost everybody can be everybody could be their own journalist. So what incentive does an aspiring journalist have to join a newsroom rather than just be their own influencer and get a lot more money than you could starting as a trainee?
Any of the panelists want to answer the question?
I mean, this thing about influencer, I have a lot of issues about the so-called influencers because, this entire medium of, let's say, a YouTube influencer or whatever, I mean, it's not always very clear that the number of followers are genuine. There are all kinds of issues about bots and stuff like that. So it's not really pristine pure or something. It's quite turbid actually in that sense, the following. And then as the influence from whatever I have come across, it places a lot of stress on the influencer because you need to come up with something regularly on some issue, and then you need to be heard. It needs to be effective. So there is a lot of pressure on yourself. And yes, of course, if you have say 10 million people watching you, then you will get a lot of money through YouTube. It's fundamentally that is the reason where YouTube revenues are good, and then you continue to do it. But the point is that you really don't make much of a progress beyond it's a lonely job in some ways. So I think being an influencer, I don't think it's a very great thing. It's good to be a part of society. Good to mingle with colleagues. Have a newsroom. Feel there's a lot of life in that, and you also learn one hell of a lot because it's it's not just about trying to influence somebody. It's also interpersonal relationships. You get to see how other people are in various ways. So it's a whole lot of things. So I'm personally not very enamored by influencers or what they do, and I always am very skeptical.
So since I'm the one who's stuck my neck out and said I want to be teaching how to be a social media influencer, I'm going to say this. See, I was reading a paper the other day, and which talked about which was talking about credibility of people who are on YouTube, right? And if you look at that scatter plot that came out over there, Ravish Kumar was up there. He had no challengers until down here, right? Nothing. So what does that tell you? That you first had to do that hardcore shoe leather journalism, and then become that influencer who would actually earn credit. So there's something to be said about that.
I hope that answered your question. I am told we do not have any more time for any more questions, but feel free to approach the panelists with any question you may have. Thank you so much for this wonderful, engaging, and informative